What's up, everybody? Welcome to today's edition of Locked On ACC. I'm your host, Candace Cooper. Thanks so much for joining me today. We have a great conversation ahead of ourselves as we're talking with AJ Black of Locked On Boston College on all things realignment. Of course, that's a hot topic word, but what's bigger is the fact that we are trying to predict what could be. There's so many different ways that the ACC could probably get this thing together, but more importantly, we got to have the conversation about how did we get here? I cannot believe the ACC, a conference that I have grown up to love, is in shambles, and money is the name of the game, but ultimately I hope we can find some sense of loyalty. But let's have that conversation here today. AJ, thank you so much for joining the show.
Thanks for having me on. We just talked last week and it seems like everything has changed.
Exactly, right? I can't believe we're over here making predictions of no divisions and getting excited about, what's coming of ACC football. And now we're sitting here finding ourselves damn near not going to have a conference going to dissolve. So I'm not trying to be in the panic mode, but I'm getting close.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we'll talk a little bit more about what it needs to be, but I think there's ways for this conference to save themselves, but I haven't seen them do it. Like you're hearing all these other conferences doing things except for the ACC, and that's worrisome.
Maybe Jim Phillips is like the ultimate Godfather gangster, where he's just he's not letting any of us in on what he's plotting, and then he's ultimately just gonna come out with the ace of spades, or the big joker or something like that. For those of you who play spades, let's hope that's what it is, and he's not just not crapping his pants right now. But
well, maybe, and it kind of links in with a saying that I have started to do with my work in the media, which is don't over promise and under deliver.
Yeah.
So maybe he's gonna with his quietness, you're not expecting anything, and then when he does it, as you kind of said, it's just a different way of looking at it. Boom, he's gonna look like the Mad Hatter out there doing crazy things to keep the conference in check.
Man, I'm seriously praying that is his mentality right now. But of course, when we look back on what the ACC has been in the rich tradition of, serious sports powerhouses, it's hard to believe that we're in a conversation that the ACC might dissolve. And you had the good fortune of putting up a very great video. If you have not checked Locked On Boston College on YouTube and subscribed yet, you're doing yourself a disservice. But AJ put up the conversation about realignment, of course, the hot buzzing thing. And of course, people are going at it in the comments, and everyone thinks they know everything. But if you could just give a little bit of your take about the background of how you were hey, let me just put this out there, and kind of how it went.
Sure. So basically it's in the end, it's still the end of the ACC, but I kind of envision the way that
AJ, that was very negative.
Well, yeah, but it's negative, but it's just, as for me, it's how I see it is reimagining. I'm going to spin it here.
There we
reimagining how you see college football. Right.
Okay.
And basically I'm on board with there possibly being two mega conferences in the end of the day, what eventually the end product will be. And it basically will be a northern tier and a northern conference and a southern conference. And it would basically be the Big Ten. It would be run by Kevin Warren, and then the South would be, the SEC, but they'll probably change. They'll change. SEC probably won't change the branding, but maybe neither will. But, in the end of the day, what you're going to get is all of these conferences, the Big 12 is doing things to save themselves right now. The Pac-12 is dead. And you're going to get a big 30 team conference on the North and the South. And it would be run kind of like what you see in the NFL, where you have an Eastern conference, Eastern division, a Midwest division, and a Western division, or whatever way you want to do it, so that it's not 30 teams and then it's complete chaos. It's, the Eastern division plays most of the Eastern division. Hey, that's a lot of the ACC schools. You'll have Rutgers and BC and Pitt and Syracuse and Virginia Tech and maybe West Virginia at that point. Looks a little bit like the old Big East. Then you have the Western, which is a lot of the Pac-12 schools. They're playing against each other. And then the Southern schools will do kind of the same thing. They'll poach Clemson, Florida State, Duke, Wake Forest, most of the Big 12. And they'll do that kind of similar thing where you'll have the Tobacco Road group, the Florida group, and then maybe the Texas schools, or whatever way they want to do it, and then run college football. Again, you'll get those regional rivalries, which is what everyone wants, but it just looks different. And I know for everyone that at the end of the day, it feels weird to have that because it's a different way of looking at things. But maybe in the end, if you have, 65 Power 5 schools and they all find a home in this system, it still kind of ends up working out, right?
No, AJ, and let me tell you why.
Go for it.
College football is not the NFL. While I do think that's a brilliant idea, I do think having regions and pretty much trying to emulate the NFL and having divisions is excellent. To me, it's like it takes away from the Saturdays you get up, you go with your mom or pop to go to a game, and like you have this rich tradition. You're going to go see, that huge rivalry game, the red bandana game at Boston College, or you have the UNC, NC State game, or anything like that. Even the Miami, Florida State game. Like you have your rich tradition of rivalries restored. And to me, you're doing yourself a disservice for these kids, because as much as we want the NFL and like we want to emulate having professionalism, at some point, can we just not enjoy being college athletes? Like I know for one, trying to do this NIL deal stuff is already probably cumbersome enough, but then to try and add on a professional type schedule as well as college academics is damn near insane. And let's not forget, we're doing all this regional stuff and division stuff for football. Like what do those implications mean for your we called it today on yesterday's show with Kenton Gibbs, your non-for-profit, because at the end of the day, you're not generating a lot of money. It's a loss, but you still are having the opportunity to participate in sports. And from a woman's perspective, Title IX to me is in jeopardy when you start doing these division things, because there's a lot of sports that don't transcend, for certain universities. And so to me, it's just, we're trying to be professional in football. And if football needs to be taken away, like its own entity, fine. But I don't know how you make that work for like state funded schools.
So, okay. I have answers to everything you brought up.
I can't wait.
So regional stuff, as I said, you would make each division, like you're going to have a whole new playoff system, right? You have basically like a ACC South division, which like Wake Forest, Duke, Clemson, like you put them all in a division. So you get those regional games every year, right? You get that in there. That's the first piece that would kind of address that issue. So it's not like you're going to have Boston College playing Stanford or that would be a good game. Never mind. Boston, like they would like that. Rutgers versus Stanford. No one would really care about that, right?
For sure.
That's kind of a whack game, and it's not like whack. What am I saying? But you know what I mean? Like you're gonna get the majority of your local games still in if you do a system like this. And this is all just things I've been reading about and kind of the way I envision the end game being. So you hit that. The part that you lose, because I think what you do is you get those regional games that you always play, whether it's wherever you live and those schools. You get rid of, unfortunately, the FCS is going to have to change too. You get rid of those games, you get rid of the money games. And I think the Power 5 is going to become its own entity as well, which is, the Group of 5 is going to be their own entity as well, because I think you're going to remove those games so that you can reschedule. You play your local teams, and then your out of conference is within your grouping that you can play. Like, okay, so Boston College plays UCLA and they play Ohio State or something like that. So you can get those. That is how you would envision the out of conference. Now, your second point that I thought was really important too, and I touched on this in my video, is that I think that this new system should be football only, and that with every other sport, basketball, including men's and women's basketball, the Olympic sports, needs to go regional, I think. And I think it's, I would much rather see for basketball, each like region has a rich history of rivalries that I feel like with these bigger conferences have kind of gone away, at different points, right? Like up here, again, I'm going from a Boston College perspective from the Big East. BC had a big rivalry with Georgetown and Villanova, and they don't play them anymore because they're not in the ACC. Right. Now, you could change that. And what it would do for the schools, and the schools, of course, they're being a business, they're going to like this, is you cut out a lot of the travel costs, because now Boston College doesn't have to travel Miami, for every sport. They can go to, Harvard and play Harvard, because Harvard's a good school in a lot of sports, and that's fun. You can cut down a lot of those things. And I think that, again, reinvigorates those local rivalries for different things. So again, it's all just how this is all plays out. If it's all just a cash grab, everything I'm saying is crap, and they're just going to do what the easy thing is to make money. But if the leaders in charge here think about a different way of looking at everything, from men's football all the way down to the non-revenue sports, they can make college sports different but still effective. So my 2 cents.
Yeah, no, those are great 2 cents. I think you bring up really good points, and I'm always down for having the discussion, but I really hope that Jim Phillips is having this discussion as well.
Yep.
That's my only 2 to 3 cents about that. Before we get into a deeper conversation of what probably could be, should we move forward with the dismantling of the ACC as we see it in its current state, I want to remind you guys that with ever increasing numbers of makes and models, it's now impossible for your local chain auto parts stores to stock all the parts you need. Save time and money when using Rock Auto. It's a family business serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. Rock Auto prices are reliably low for every customer, and they have everything you need, from brake parts, tail lamps, motor oil, and even new carpet. We encourage you to head to rockauto.com right now. See all the parts available for your car or truck, right locked on in there. How did you hear about us box? We know we sent you. Amazing selection, reliable prices, all the parts your car will ever need. Please visit rockauto.com. So we're rocking and rolling here with AJ Black of Locked On Boston College. And of course, we are talking about what could be the start of the end of the ACC. Never thought it could be. As a former student athlete myself at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, I just am so used to greatness. That is the Atlantic Coast Conference. But times change. I never thought Roy Williams would leave, but things get crazy. I never thought Coach K would leave, but here we are. And, I think that now we're having to have come to Jesus conversation about the future of the conference. And on yesterday's show, Kendra Gibbs and I were talking about Florida State and Clemson being the 2 possible first to leave. Now, for you, AJ, someone who's a part of the Boston College that doesn't necessarily get the biggest attention in necessarily football's perspective when it comes to the ACC, but still has a very strong program. Do you feel any nerves towards this dismantling? And do you feel like where a potential home could be for Boston College?
I mean, I think I am worried.
Yeah.
I said this before that, it depends on how they're envisioning the values of these schools. If it's a brand thing, then I'm a little worried. If it's a media market, if this is all about TV deals and things like that, well, Boston's a major media markets. If the Big Ten wants to expand to hit those major media markets, as I said on my show, there's tons of Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State fans that live in Boston. They would be able to get good ratings in this area.
That's fair. Yeah.
You know what I mean? And on top of the Boston College stuff. So that piece I'm not that concerned about, but the piece that does worry me is if they're like, oh, let's look at with blinders at how Boston College has been in the last 15 years, then I'm worried, because of course, football has been a 7-5, 6-6 team consistently for 10 years straight, with sporadic, really bad seasons thrown in.
Yeah.
But I worry that if that is the case, that the Big Ten won't look at a school like BC, because when you're looking at the school, the sports that they're offering, what's BC's biggest attractive sport right now, other than football? It's hockey. And that's unless the Big Ten really wants BC for men's hockey, and I'm sure BC would drop, we're not going to talk about Hockey East, which is a big Northeast thing.
Yeah.
That's not a big selling point for them. So I'm worried about that, because if that's the case, where does Boston College end up?
Yeah. Well, I know I was going to say women's lacrosse in Charlotte North. That could be your ticket right there.
Right. Yeah. I mean, yeah. I mean, the ticket sales and the attractiveness of that program. I do think that, I hope that if all this continues, it goes on for a couple of years, because as you've said, and we've agreed that with Boston College, like with Jeff Hafley, I think he's going in the right direction.
Yeah.
I think Earl Grant's going in the right direction.
Yes.
So I think the program should get a little bit of momentum into the stage. And I do think, I think a lot of fans, again, have tunnel vision of what BC has been, But what they could become in a program in a system like this with more money, I think Boston College would be attractive and has history with a lot of Big Ten programs. And they've been rumored with the Big Ten even before this realignment stuff. So they wouldn't surprise me if they're one of those teams that kind of slides in with a couple other teams, kind of like what they did with the ACC.
Right. But I guess my biggest question is, with Coach Halfley, Coach Grant, as you mentioned, I'm sure these coaches are panicking just a little bit. I know we're sidetracking here, but all the coaches who are trying to make a fast track to build their resume, maybe go to bigger conferences, bigger programs, I'm sure you're sweating bullets a little bit trying to figure out where you're going to be. I'm sure the ACC kickoff is going to be thriving with conversations around all of this.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I've heard, I cover recruiting.
Yeah.
That I've heard buzz that it's already being started. It's already being used on the recruiting trail negatively against the ACC.
Wow.
That the concern about instability has been thrown at kids. I've heard multiple people who I know talk to me about that. So it's been used negatively against the ACC. And that's why I'm hoping, I'm crossing my fingers. I want long-term stuff, but I'm hoping we hear it this week.
Yeah,
from Jim
for
Phillips,
sure.
because he's been wicked.
Sorry,
I'm sounding like Boston.
No,
I did it.
I
try not to say wicked.
I love it.
He's been super quiet.
Yeah.
And I want to hear more from him. And he's like the only commissioner that hasn't been talking.
And, I think we're going to sit here and pray that he's a Godfather gangster who's going to make some moves in the dark and just pop out. And maybe, we got 2 weeks before the kickoff, and maybe he's going to address it there. And it's going to be breaking news where everyone's laptops are going to just go into a frenzy because we're all going to be trying to tweet his quotes so fast. That's my prayer. 1. 2, I'm just I absolutely agree that something needs to be done because we look crazy. And I'm the ACC is not crazy. Am I tripping? The way I've seen the ACC be commented and people talk about, I'm just confused. Didn't we just have 5 out of the 8 teams go to the Elite 8? Do we not just have Clemson winning national championships 2-3 years ago? Are we scrubs all of a sudden? I don't think that that's the case. So it's just very perplexing, but also a need for our commissioner to kind of just reassure, the institutions that things are going halfway decent. But, say all that to say, if we were to have to dismantle and things are going to go awry and we're going to slowly have to depart from what we know to be the Atlantic Coast Conference, I would love to get your thoughts on how you feel like we could move away from the current ACC and maybe into some better light that still makes our conference viable.
Yeah. So I had to laugh because as we're recording this, I'm reading a tweet that says from Brian Floyd, who writes for SB Nation. It says, I need the ACC and Pac-12 to merge and then name the 2 divisions Atlantic and Coastal.
See, I'm just saying we're hip. So just know you heard it here exclusively first, though.
I think looking outside the box, grabbing some teams like the Pac-12, I think is perfectly set for some poaching from the ACC. And I think the schools that are available would make the ACC a solid power conference again, to the Pac-12 and merged. And as I was just joking, made an Atlantic and a Coastal and just reimagine the name. Who cares if it's not the ACC as it was? Yeah. Things are changing. It's better than it being dead, right?
Absolutely.
If you added, think of this, who's still available? Oregon, Washington, Cal, Stanford, Oregon State, Washington State. Okay. The last 2 you can take or leave, right? Add those schools. Then you throw that Hail Mary. I refer to it on my podcast. It's the white whale for Jim Phillips, Notre Dame. So now you have Stanford, Washington, Oregon, Notre Dame added in with that group. I think that would get you out of the grant of rights with ESPN right away. I think you'd have to be able to get back to the table. That's a win for the conference right there. That enough. If you need to do something like that to get ESPN back to the table to cut up that ESPN deal, because that ESPN deal is what's killing this conference. Yes. Right? You do that, you get the money back up. Now you have a group of good opponents that'll keep Clemson and Florida State, Miami's and UNC's happy, right?
Yeah.
And then that should give you a good, solid group to get the ACC and move it forward.
Yeah, I think that is just like, to me, it's all about the pitch, right? Like we're trying to pitch to the Clemsons who very much care about football. Right. You're trying to pitch to the Florida States and the Miamis who very much care about brand. And to me, you're trying to pitch to the Carolinas who are like loyal to the soil, been here since infancy, but they're trying to say, all right, well, we're kind of being dangled with a new carrot. But I'm just curious, like now that we're having all of this realignment talk, like how often has this happened? Because to me, this personally isn't coming out of nowhere. Like I'm just like, what the hell is going on? Everyone's just shifting and deciding, I'm good, you know? So I'm just curious to see how long this has been coming to pass. And I've been joking on Twitter, like, okay, well, what was the point of the alliance, the Pac-12, the ACC, and the Big 10, if Kevin Warren was just gonna be like a big FU to all of us. And like, I just would love to be a fly on the wall when that UCLA thing went down, because I can't imagine that going over well.
It's totally the Fredo and the Godfather thing. I put a tweet up. I was surprised no one reacted, but I guess it was a little weird. But like, it's Fredo. Fredo is Kevin Warren from the Big Ten, where he kind of goes behind the Godfather's back, the group's back, and does what he wants, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think the realignment thing in college football has been a nonstop thing for 15, 20 years. I mean, it goes all the way back to the Big East. I mean, BC is not a big factor right now, but they were a big factor when it happened. Right.
Right.
And that first go round when the Big East got poached by the ACC, and then all these other conferences started to merge and everything started moving around. I mean, it's been going on all the time in college football. If you want to go back further than that. Right.
Right.
But it's always that evolution. It just feels right now that's more like a consolidation than a realignment. You know what I mean? Like all the powers are just going into one conference instead of a bunch of different conferences, or moving between conferences.
Right.
And that is what makes it feel a little weirder. But, you know, again, as I said, like if you're viewing conferences maybe as a bigger term, as more of a governing body at that point, of like, that's what the new conference is going to be, is instead they're going to kick out the NCAA, which I still think is going to happen.
Yeah.
And that's who runs it, is like, you know, the Big Ten is running this super conference with all these different, like what would be conferences in between it. That could be kind of how you see things now. That could be what it turns into. But to me right now, like I can see like the panic, right? That Absolutely. There's going to be schools that are left out, or these rivalries are getting killed and everything is going away. But it's going to be fascinating. I can't wait to keep talking about this with you, Candace, for the next like month or so.
I know. Absolutely. You brought up a really good point about NCAA, and I want to finish on that note. And I want to remind you guys that first, from the people who admitted healthy and tasty comes the latest gift to your taste buds. You probably tried the amazing coconut brownie chunk Built bar, but guess what? Your friends at Built have given coconut brownie chunk, say that 3 times fast, the Puffs treatment. That's right, coconut brownie chunk Built bar, flavor you love, in a deliciously chewy marshmallow covered in 100% real chocolate. The best part about the Built Puffs is, of course, they taste amazing, but you can enjoy them guilt-free because they are good for you. They are a perfect treat, perfect when you are craving, you need to satisfy your sweet tooth, if you need a quick, healthy snack and are looking for an excellent source of protein. Go to built.com right now, use promo code LOCK15 and get 15% off your order. Again, using promo code LOCK15. So wrapping up here with AJ Black of Locked On Boston College. And he brought up a very interesting point before we talked about those lovely, delicious Built Bar treats, about the NCAA and how it's pretty much a big FU to the NCAA in so many words. And for those people who don't really know, I guess, the strife that is with the NCAA, can you maybe touch on why so many schools are pretty much trying to figure out a way to get around or just avoid the NCAA at all costs, especially like, to me, the Mark Emmert thing, like him deciding to retire. I feel like he had to just know this was all coming.
I mean, it's just been years and years of inconsistency, and it's, you know, not allowing certain things to evolve naturally. That I feel like the schools and the player and the administrators are just like done with the NCAA, kind of like what you said with Emmert, right? It goes back to the abandoned thing with like players wanting to get paid. And I know they've kind of opened the NIL box, but that again goes back on the NCAA, right? They had time to kind of figure this out, right? And be able to get a system in place that's equitable for the players, but also systematic so that it's like it has regulations. Instead, they just put their head in the sand. NCAA put their head in the sand, and now it's like Pandora's box has been opened up throughout the world. And, you got Miami football, who's, writing humongous checks to every player, while other schools are going, what the hell? How am I supposed to be able to, it's such a mayhem right now. Right.
Yeah.
So there's all that going on. There's, this, institutional inequities in the ways that they've treated certain things going on. Like, whatever you want to say about what went on with like Baylor or even UNC, like there was stuff that went on, and the NCAA did a horrible job of regulating any of that. And that's on them. Right. So I think there's just frustration from fans, from players, from administrators with this overarching body that doesn't seem to do anything consistently or equitably. And they want to be able to say, screw this, we're going to do it on our own, and remove themselves. And they could. And I think it's going to be happening soon.
Yeah. And my biggest thing is like, maybe the signs were there when all of the NIL stuff started going down and there was no governing unified regulation and formality. When people were like, hey, NCAA, some of these states are specifically allowing for this to happen. If you don't get on board, if you don't try to give some regulation, it's going to be a circus. And they didn't do what anybody recommended or advised them to do. And now we have a zoo, and now you got, Nick Saban crying on TV talking about this is not fair. So to me, I'm sitting here saying NCAA has like some inkling, as much as the progress we've seen towards NIL, they had some inkling that the football and college football was going to just take a life of its own. And people are just going to get tired of, these false policing, what the way they decide has been very inconsistent, as you said, about when they want to regulate things. So to me, I'm fine with the NCAA doing away with itself. I feel like they've screwed a lot of kids out of plenty of opportunities, years of eligibility, and the like. Like, to me, it was a miracle that they even gave people an extra year for COVID and all that good stuff. But just to see it now, I'm just very curious how they try and move forward and regulate and make sure that they, pretty much show who's boss. Like the power dynamic has shifted. Like we can say it shifted a little more in favor for the kids, but it really is these institutions, because you can't tell me that, people have thought about these children when it came to making all these deals.
Right. No, it's all about the member institutions that's getting all that, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
But I mean, when it all boils down to, I think there's so many good ideas out there. I really do like the Coastal Conference idea. I'm hoping that sticks. I hope we can come back to the show and say you heard it here first and just re-air it, because that one might be the moneymaker. But for folks who want to continue listening to your sound wisdom and advice, where can they find you, follow your work?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm the host of Locked On Boston College. I'm supposed to do this every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, but because of the 4th of July, I'm doing Tuesday and Thursday this week because it's also my birthday and I've just been out.
Today's your birthday?
Yeah.
Oh my God, AJ. Way to bury the whole freaking show. Are you serious?
Yeah. I just got back.
Oh my God.
I know what I did for my birthday?
Please do.
So here's your old guy day of the week, right?
Yeah.
So I have 2 kids. I have a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. And their daycare was closed and my wife had to work. So I got stuck with them all day. I am exhausted, Candace. So I went out for dinner and I was like, both me and my wife is more chippy than me, but I was like, I've been with the 2 of them all day long. And I feel for everyone who has little kids like this, but that was been my entire day. I enjoyed a drink and some dinner and I'm going to go to bed early.
Love that for you. Oh my gosh. Happy birthday.
And then
you got a new job. Tell the people about the job.
Yeah, I'm gonna get into my new my new deal too. So I am now the publisher of 247's Eagle Insider. So I run the biggest BC site now in terms of paid subscribers and for free content. So if you want to check it out, awesome. I've talked on the site before about my recruiting chops. I have a ton of it. I actually have a scoop on there right now for my subscribers that I actually my first week blew up the Virginia Tech boards, and they're furious at me, but I'm right and they know I'm right. So check out Eagle Insider on the 247 network and become a subscriber. I think you'll enjoy it.
No doubt about it. AJ, happy birthday, friend.
All right. Thanks, Candace. I really appreciate it.
Of course. You guys have a great rest of your week. Candace Cooper and AJ Black. Until next time.